Okay, we're going to take a look at Cocktail with the release of the latest version. Significant changes and improvements have been made to the layout editor and the layout system in general in the tool. And I'm going to go over some of those advancements today. So the first thing I want to show you is the alignment. This is a new feature of Cocktail. So if I were to just draw a rectangle here, and just to make it easier to see, I'll just give it a really bright green fill. If I go to these panels, these properties here, horizontal alignment and vertical alignment, I can see that it's currently left and top. You'll notice if you've used the previous versions of the tool, X and Y used to be left and top. Those have been renamed here because the meaning of these have changed just a little bit because of the alignment changes. So the default is horizontal alignment left and vertical alignment top, but when X and Y are both 0, you can change the alignment of the object that you have placed, the layer. And for instance, you could align it to the right. And what that does is it takes the right edge of the layer and uses that as 0. That's the origin. That becomes the origin of the layer, and it aligns it to the right of the layout in this case, and the right of the layout becomes 0. So this is now aligned. It's anchored basically to the right side of the layout. And you'll see the X and Y are now 0, 0 because this top corner has actually become the 0, 0 point, and we're offsetting from here. If I were to move this around in the view, just like normal, you'll see that when we go to the left, X becomes negative because we're moving left of the origin. Okay. All right. So that's how that works. And of course you can do alignment to the center, and you can do it on the vertical as well as the horizontal. You can align to the right bottom, the left bottom, etc. So you can combine these to basically have 9 different anchor points in the layout where you can align your objects. And note that when it's center, the very center of this layer, using its width and height, is at the very center of the layout. Okay. All right, so that's that. Another thing that I would like to show you is if you do, there's another new feature here that allows you to set the width and height to auto. And when you do this, you know, if everything is set like in this way, then it basically shrinks down to 0 because there's nothing contained within it that gives it any size. But if you set the alignment to stretch, you're going to see that it fills the layout. So you can really quickly make something that's, say, a background for your card that you're creating. You can just set X, Y to 0 and width and height to auto, and then stretch. And you don't have to position it manually. And if your layout size actually changes, so if I go to the layout and I make this 2.5 by 3.5 or something, so I've shrunk it on one dimension and increased the size on the other dimension. No, that's 3.6, 3.5. You'll see that it maintains that stretch. So it stretches to fill whatever the size of the layout is. So that's a pretty cool feature, and you can see that here. I've actually selected the rectangle, and it matches the size of the layout perfectly. It's not going outside of it, which we could do if we just stretched it out, but it's maintaining it. Okay, so let's go back to left top, and let's give this a size. Okay, so that's the auto sizing, part of the auto sizing, and the alignment that's been added. Those are already really powerful features, but when you combine these with some other features, including the groups, there were groups previously, but you basically just added a group by clicking the group button down here, and that just added a layer that doesn't have any size, it just acts as a container for things, and it only had this enabled property before, so you could disable an entire group of layers, you know, or change the visibility of the whole group or whatever you wanted to do. Well, now groups have position and size, and you can rotate them and you can align them just like every other layer. And so what this allows us to do, let me actually make the group using this tool. What this allows us to do is we could just drag out a big, or whatever size thing we want the group to be. Now I've got a group here, it's got some size and positional information. Let's put it 0, 0. If I then create a rectangle, let's make our rectangle again. I'm going to put a rectangle in here. I'm going to fill it with blue this time. And I can drag that into my group. Well, now when I actually select the group itself, the rectangle goes with the group. And what's cool about this is that now we can have objects like, say, stars, for instance. Let's fill this with a white. And so we got our group here. Now you can see I've got this star and this rectangle, but this group is a lot bigger than it needs to be. We can shrink that down or whatever. Oh, the star's not inside there. I forgot. Drag the star in there, right? And now I can rotate this whole group, including the star and background rectangle. And I can move it around as a single object instead of moving individual objects around. And the objects inside the group, like the star, they can also be rotated within this group. So you have the ability to individually change the elements within the group, but then have the group itself be a thing that you can move around and rotate on the screen. And again, if I look at, let's say, this rectangle here, if I set its position to 0, 0, and I set the width to auto and the height to auto, and I stretch this, guess what it's going to do? It's going to fill up the entire group. It fills up its container. So before, when we saw this, it was filling up the layout, because the layout was a top level container that the rectangle was inside of, but we can do the same thing inside of a group so that it will fill up the whole group. And that'll work also with the star. Let me take out this rotation, set this to auto, and stretch this, and that'll fill the entire group, just like that. And you can move the group around. Okay, so that's really cool. Right, and if I then take this group, because these guys are stretched inside of it, if I then take this group, let's see here. Oh, the width is no longer set to auto because I rotated it. Yeah. All right, now if I take the group and I resize it, you'll see the rectangle and the star, because they're stretched inside the group, they resize with it as well. And you can see the star goes outside the group here a little bit. That's because of the rotation. Yeah. There you can see. All right. Now if I make this kind of small like that, I got this little box with a star in it, and that's my group. I'll go ahead and copy this and paste this a couple times. I've got this offset in there. So remove those offsets. Oh, I see. It grouped it. The group was put inside the group. Should have realized that. Alright, so now I've got 4 individual stars, all on top of one another. Okay, I'm going to show you these other new panels here. First one is a grid. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag this grid out here, and I'm going to take each of these star groups and I'm going to drag them into this grid. And you can see what it's doing, because the grid has a property of number of columns, and there's a single column. I've added 4 items to it. So it's laid them out in this grid of 1 column. If I change this to 2 columns, I get this grid of all 4 stars together. And if I set the grid width and height to auto, now I'm not setting it to stretch on the alignment, because that would make it fill the whole layout, which I don't want to do. It's just big enough to hold my 4 groups and all my stars. Okay. Another cool feature of this is you can set the number of visible items. It's set to an impossibly large number to start with, but if I were to make this 2 or 1, I can set the number of items that show up, and that can be useful if you're building cards that have some kind of icon on them that's repeated a number of times, say for cost of the card or for some ability or something like that. You can use this functionality. Now, in addition to the grid, there's another new type of layer which is called a stack. And if I create a stack over here and I take my items from my grid and I move them into the stack, I'm going to get some similar behavior here. Now these are all stacked horizontally. They're given just enough space for each element, and the stack itself can be moved around this. We can change the orientation to be vertical. This is a little bit big for this demo. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to make this just a little bit bigger. And what you can do is you can actually align the contents centered vertically, or we can have them aligned to the bottom. If we do this with the orientation set to horizontal, we can center this in the horizontal, and we can align to, if we want these aligned to the top, then it uses the alignment for each of the elements. So we can line all these to the top of this. So now it's in the top center of the stack, and then the stack itself we could align to the center and to the top, or whatever we wanted to do. We could resize it so that we could bring it down a little bit like this. So okay, there's one last thing I want to show you guys, and it's related to how to center text in this system. Alright, so if let's say I just kind of turn the visibility off for this thing. And I'm going to create some text, right? Now if I create a text layer, I have this box, and when I use the centering for this box, I can say set the X and Y to 0, and I can do center and center for horizontal and vertical alignment. But what you'll see here is that when it does the centering, it's going to take the center of the box that the text is in and use that as the origin where it does the centering from. More than likely, you want the text itself to be centered. And so you could adjust this by kind of resizing this and resetting this back to 0. And that'd be fine. That pretty much works. But an even better way to do this is to actually go to the height and make the height auto. And what that does is it gives the height just enough space to fit the text. And then if you like to have the text itself centered horizontally for both lines here, you can just set text alignment to center, so everything is centered within this box. And you'll see that the center point here is right in the center of the layout. And of course you could do the same thing within a group. Okay, so that just about does it for the new alignment features, the auto width height, the new group layers, including the group, the grid, and the stack. If you'd like to find more information, the best place to go is our Discord server, and I'll leave a link down below so you can check that out. The way the layout stuff works now with the horizontal and vertical alignment and everything, it's new for the tool, might be confusing for other people who've used other systems potentially, but it's very powerful and lets you do a lot of stuff. So that's it for this video, and subscribe below to find out what the next big thing is going to be. Click the bell to get notified when we have new videos out. Thanks for watching.